Welcome to Programming with Professor Califf. Today I'd like to talk about class variables and methods, which are identified in Java by the static keyword. We'll also look at some examples for class methods in the Java math class. The static keyword can be put on an element of a class to say that this belongs to the class itself, rather than to the individual objects. We can do this with variables, the data, and with methods. Let's talk first about class variables. Most of the data we define in a class has one copy per object. So our savings account objects each have their own balance. A student would probably define a name, and each different student object would have its own name. But on rare occasions, it's helpful to have a variable that belongs to the class. This means there will be just one copy of that data item. Obviously, we don't access it using the object variable name because there is no object. Instead, we use the class name. So it'll be class name dot variable name. We're actually already familiar with a couple of class variables. The system class is one of the many classes that Java has provided for us, and we've been using two static or class variables from that class, system.in and system.out. In addition to the class variables, we can have class methods. These are methods that will be called using the class name. Most of our methods use object data. For our savings account, getBalance returns the object's account balance, and withdraw and deposit modify that balance. Our class methods don't have access to any object data. They can operate on any class variables that might exist, but mostly they just operate on their parameters, on the data we give them when we call the method. So a prototypical example of using static or class methods is the math class in Java. This is the class Java provides to help us do math beyond simple arithmetic. All of these math functions don't need object data to operate on. We give the methods the data we need the class to perform the operation on, and then it gives back the result. So let's look at a couple of examples of methods from the math class. So the first one I have here is ABS, or abs, which is absolute value. So you can see the beginning of the declaration of it has static, then int, then the name abs, and then the int num. So we'll be passing that in. And what it's going to do is it's going to take in the num that is the parameter, that argument we give it, and it'll return the absolute value of that. Note that it doesn't have to be integer. It also exists for floats, for doubles, and for longs. So for any of those, we can call math.abs. If I want to know the difference between two numbers as a positive value, but I don't know which number is larger, I can easily say int diff is assigned math.abs num1 minus num2. And then that will, if num2 was the larger value, and we get a negative from the difference, then the absolute value function will give us that positive value we're looking for. Another one, one operator that feels like it's missing is exponentiation, because we don't have that as a basic arithmetic operator in Java. But what we do have is the Pow function, which does power. So Pow here stands for power. So it's going to return base to the power of exponent. So if I say double result is assigned math.pow 2, 10, then that's going to compute 2 to the 10th, which is 1024, and return that. Another example would be rounding. If I have a number and I don't want to just truncate it. Now we can always get the integer part of a number by using casting. So if I just want to chop off the parts after the decimal point, I can do that very easily. But if I want to actually round it, I need a function to do that, and round would be that function. So there's also one that returns an int from a float, and we simply say math.round my double, and that rounded integer will be stored into result. Then another one that we might be interested in is square root. So obviously that's something we don't really want to have to compute. There is a method in the math class to do square roots. So example, double result is assigned math.square root my double. There are a lot of other capabilities in the math class, Again, I would certainly encourage you, if you have some interesting math to do, to go check out the math class and see what's available there. It handles trig functions, min, max, all sorts of things that it will do for us. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we'll talk a bit about formatting numbers for our output.